Have you ever stopped to think about the hidden power of a simple grain of salt? It might sound strange, but salt, that common ingredient we use every day, holds a spiritual significance far beyond what most people imagine. What if I told you that salt could be one of the most powerful weapons against the forces of evil? That it not only preserves food, but can also preserve your soul and protect your home? It seems counterintuitive, doesn't it? But the truth is, salt has been used since biblical times to break curses, purify spaces, and seal eternal covenants. If you're looking for a practical way to bring protection and blessings into your life, stick with me, because what you're about to discover in this video could completely change the way you see this humble element. Salt, often seen merely as a seasoning, is actually a powerful spiritual weapon. In Christian faith, it carries deep meaning and is used to break curses and bring blessings. Imagine the power of such a tiny grain, capable of dispelling spiritual darkness and purifying environments. It's no wonder that in many traditions, salt is spread at the doorways of homes or mixed into water for blessing and protection. Did you know that the simple act of putting salt in a glass of water and praying over it can bring protection to your home? This practice is ancient, with biblical roots, where salt has always been seen as a symbol of covenant and purification. When you incorporate salt into your prayer rituals, you're claiming the purity and power it symbolizes. It's like bringing a spiritual shield into your daily life, something anyone can do, no matter where they are. But it's not just about a ritual. Think of salt as a constant reminder of the divine power at your disposal. Just as it preserves and flavors food, salt has the power to preserve and strengthen your faith. When you use salt with intention, you're participating in an ancient tradition, a simple yet incredibly effective tool against negative forces. As we explore this concept, we can't help but consider the role of salt in different cultures and religions, where it's used as a purifying and protective element. But what is the origin of this power? Why does salt hold such a significant role in spirituality? This leads us to reflect on its divine creation and purpose, a topic that deserves deeper exploration. Salt, from the very beginning of creation, carries a divine purpose, designed by God even before life existed. In the biblical account of Genesis, we see that God, in his infinite wisdom, created all elements with a specific intention, and salt was no exception. It didn't just appear as any other mineral substance. It became a vital component for life and spirituality, something that transcends simple human understanding. When we think of salt as a divine creation, we begin to understand its true value beyond the kitchen. It's an element that God set apart to be more than a seasoning. It's a symbol of covenant and purity, as we saw in the story of Lot, where his wife was turned into a pillar of salt. This biblical event is not just a moral tale, but an illustration of the power and seriousness with which God views the use and purpose of salt. Moreover, salt reflects God's careful and intentional nature in every detail of creation. Isn't it curious that something so simple and present across the earth has such a profound impact on spirituality? Just as God created light to separate darkness, he created salt to separate the profane from the sacred. It's a way for God to remind us that even seemingly ordinary things carry an elevated purpose. By exploring this dimension of salt as a divine creation, we begin to realize that natural elements like fire and water also possess a power and authority that transcend worldly understanding. Let's now delve into the relationship between salt and these elements and understand how it becomes an essential tool for preservation and purification, following God's plan. Salt, like other essential elements such as fire and water, has been endowed with a special power granted by God. In the vast repertoire of his creations, each element holds a divine authority that goes beyond the physical realm. Fire purifies, water renews, and salt preserves and purifies. These elements are not just part of the natural world. They are spiritual instruments that act directly in our lives when used with wisdom and intention. Consider the power of salt in preservation. It has been used for millennia to keep food fresh, away from decay. But this physical function is merely a reflection of its spiritual purpose, to preserve purity and sanctity. Just as salt prevents meat from spoiling, it can also prevent the soul from corruption, acting as a shield against negative influences. Have you thought about using salt in your daily spiritual practices? A pinch at your home's entrance, for example, can serve as an invisible barrier against evil. However, salt doesn't act alone. In combination with other elements like water, it becomes even more powerful. Water, a symbol of life and rebirth, when mixed with salt, enhances its capacity for purification and protection. Imagine a simple basin of salt water in a prayer ritual, overflowing with spiritual power. These are methods that have crossed centuries and still maintain their effectiveness today, connecting us with ancient practices that recognize the power of the elements. And so, by understanding salt in its entirety, we realize that it not only preserves but also purifies, cleansing not just the physical but also the spiritual. Its application in sacred rituals and daily practices brings us back to ancient traditions that viewed natural elements not just as resources but as divine tools. But salt goes beyond being just a component. It carries historical and cultural weight that has shaped civilizations and beliefs throughout the centuries. Let's explore how salt has played a fundamental role in history and cultural rituals. Want to dive even deeper into biblical themes like this? Check out our exclusive ebook in the comments. It offers a detailed analysis and spiritual reflections that complement this video. Don't miss out, download your copy right now. Salt, in addition to its spiritual role, has always been a powerful force in history and cultures around the world. Since ancient times, it has been used not only as a preservative, but also as a form of currency, a precious commodity that often determined the fate of nations and empires. In the Bible, salt is mentioned numerous times, not just as a physical element, but as a profound spiritual symbol used in offerings and purification rituals. In ancient times, salt was so valuable that it was often called white gold. Entire roads were built to facilitate the trade of this mineral, and cities flourished around its extraction and trade. It not only preserved food but also sealed pacts and agreements, being seen as a symbol of incorruptibility and durability. In some cultures, salt is still used in wedding ceremonies, symbolizing an eternal bond between spouses. Culturally, salt also played a central role in rituals and religious practices. In ancient traditions, it was common to scatter salt around an altar or a home to purify the space and ward off evil spirits. This reflects the universal belief in the purifying power of salt, which transcends religious and cultural boundaries. Even today, many people still maintain the custom of using salt to purify environments, whether at the entrance of a new home or during a moment of prayer. Thus, salt, with its historical and cultural role, goes beyond a simple seasoning. It becomes a bridge between the material and the spiritual, carrying the weight of traditions and beliefs from countless peoples throughout the centuries. But what makes salt even more fascinating is its role in spiritual warfare, where it not only preserves and purifies, but also becomes a powerful weapon against the forces of evil. Let's now explore how salt is used in spiritual battles and how it can be an essential tool for all believers. In the realm of spiritual warfare, salt takes on a prominent role as a powerful weapon against the forces of darkness. For many believers, salt is more than just an element. It is seen as a divine shield, capable of protecting against evil influences and breaking curses. This belief is rooted in ancient practices and biblical teachings, where salt was frequently used to consecrate and purify, driving away evil and bringing God's presence closer. Imagine facing a moment of great spiritual tribulation. The simple act of spreading salt around your house or in strategic locations can serve as an act of faith, a declaration that this space is consecrated to God and under His protection. This gesture, though simple, is filled with symbolism and power, functioning as a barrier against any negative force that tries to approach. And it's not just superstition. It's a practice deeply rooted in ancient and effective traditions. The use of salt in spiritual warfare is not limited to physical barriers. It can also be incorporated into prayer rituals, where a person mixes salt with water and prays, asking for protection and deliverance. These practices, passed down from generation to generation, continue to be a potent way to invoke the divine presence and repel evil. It's as if each grain of salt carries a tiny spark of God's power, ready to act when needed. Therefore, understanding salt as a tool in spiritual warfare reveals that it is more than just a natural resource. It is a gift from God to His children, a way for us to arm ourselves against the enemy. And reflecting on this, the question arises: How can we apply the power of salt in our daily lives in a practical and meaningful way? Let's now explore practical ways to use salt in our prayers and rituals, following biblical examples. Salt, with all its spiritual power, can be a practical tool in our daily lives, especially when it comes to prayers and rituals. Incorporating salt into your spiritual routine doesn't require elaborate ceremonies. Sometimes, the simplest gestures can have the greatest impacts. For instance, before going to bed, you can sprinkle a little salt around your bed, asking for divine protection for the night. This small act can make a big difference in your sense of security and peace. In moments of prayer, adding salt to water can intensify the power of your supplication. By doing so, you are symbolically purifying the environment and yourself, paving the way for your prayers to be heard more clearly. Think about how a bowl of salt water can be used during a prayer of deliverance, where each drop carries the intention to purify and protect. This is a practical example that anyone can apply, no matter where they are in their spiritual journey. Moreover, salt can be used in moments of spiritual renewal. Do you know that feeling when the environment seems heavy or charged? An effective practice is to spread salt on the doors and windows of your home, asking that all evil be banished and only God's blessings enter your home. This practice, which many may see as outdated, actually carries a power that transcends time, bringing peace and protection to your home. And so, by applying salt in our daily practices, we realize that it is more than just an element. It is a spiritual ally. But it's not just about protection and purification. Salt also carries deep symbolism, especially when it comes to the relationship between God and His people, representing an eternal covenant. Let's now understand this symbolism and how it connects with our faith and spiritual practices. Salt, in all its simplicity, is a powerful symbol of the eternal covenant between God and His people. In the Bible, it is frequently mentioned as an element that represents loyalty, purity, and divine protection. When God makes a covenant, salt is often part of that agreement, symbolizing the durability and incorruptibility of that covenant. It reminds us that, just as salt preserves food, God's covenant with us is meant to last forever. In many cultures, salt was used in covenant ceremonies, where the parties involved exchanged a handful of salt as a sign of fidelity and commitment. This was not just a symbolic gesture, but a profound act of trust and loyalty. Similarly, in the relationship between God and His people, salt serves as a constant reminder that the divine covenant is solid and unbreakable. It reinforces the idea that God's protection and blessing are always present, just as salt is present in our daily lives. Salt also embodies the concept of purity. Just as it is used to purify environments and food, it also symbolizes the purity of heart and intentions that God expects from His children. By using salt in our rituals and spiritual practices, we are reaffirming our commitment to this purity and loyalty to God. Every grain of salt we use is a small testimony of our faith and the covenant we have with the Creator. Finally, salt reminds us that we are under the protection of a divine covenant, where loyalty, purity, and protection are guaranteed by God. And as we reflect on this covenant, we are led to consider how we can apply all this knowledge in our daily lives, using salt not just as a symbol, but as a practical tool in our spiritual journey. Let's now revisit all the knowledge we've gained and think about how it can transform our spiritual lives. Now that you know the spiritual power of salt, are you ready to apply it in your life? Try using it in your prayers and rituals to see the changes happen around you. Start today by purifying your home or easing spiritual heaviness with a simple salt ritual. If you want to keep learning and protecting yourself spiritually, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Let's discover together how to live a full and protected life.